morning, everyone. I'm Rabbi Joshua Hoffman, Valley Beshalom Synagogue, and it's a joy to share a few words of Kavanah, a few words of intention as we head about on our day. As you see, I'm about ready to get into the world myself, and I just wanted to share a few thoughts before I head out into the world, and also be able to share with all of us a little thought about what this time in our days is really giving us an opportunity to consider. So what is happening in our days? If you've been paying attention to just about anything in the world, you've noticed that graduations are happening, the end of the school year, and this weekend will be the official beginning of summer. And typically I have this image of like the school doors busting wide open and throngs of students running out of the main hallway out into the freedom of the courtyard in their school with papers flying, and they're released, they're free from their school responsibilities, and the summer has begun. And here I am sitting in my car, and I'm also thinking about the big thing in my life. I have a 16-year-old child, and there is nothing more liberating to a 16-year-old, especially a boy, than receiving that driver's license. And these days, it seems like both of those are slightly different than maybe we had originally envisioned them. And, it may be that we definitely are busting open the doors, but they might be just closing down a screen and moving our seats from one direction to another as we tune into another program or get engaged in some other activity that is virtual. And while the DMV is closed and we can't go get our driver's licenses, at least here in the state of California, the idea that we're going to be able to be free from the constraints that we have in our home is something that we have a lot of pent-up and built-up desire. And when I think about this, I think about a really big idea that comes from one of the great philosophers in the 20th century. His name is Isaiah Berlin. And Isaiah Berlin wrote in about 1958. He wrote about a concept to try and reimagine what freedom really means. And he described negative freedom and positive freedom. There's negative freedom, which is freedom from. And the idea that that we, as a Jewish people, we have a very strong and profound story about freedom from slavery. And it really is the root of our story, that we were once an enslaved people, and with an outstretched arm and a mighty hand, and with God's intervention, our people were redeemed from slavery. We were liberated from slavery. And that kind of freedom, according to Isaiah Berlin, and I think even in classical Jewish understanding, is a freedom from tyranny, freedom from oppression, freedom from discrimination, freedom from all those things that separate us as human beings and as societies. Freedom, too, is a different kind of freedom altogether. It's the freedom that you experience when you're at a crossroads. That's in the words of Isaiah Berlin, and you can make a choice of which way to turn, left or right. Or in the words of the Torah in the Jewish tradition, it's the idea of standing in Mount Sinai, that the journey of freedom is not just freedom from slavery, but it's freedom to receive the Torah. And it's a freedom to journey to what we call the Promised Lands. And we're reading about that story in our narrative of Jewish history that we continue to read year after year through our Torah. And freedom, too, is a lot more complicated than it sounds. For many of us, at least in my generation, we grew up with the idea that we were free to do whatever we wanted to do. We could be whoever we wanted to be. We could grow up into the world and choose if we wanted to be doctors or professionals or business tycoons or happy garbage collectors, whatever our choice was to be. As long as we were happy, we had the freedom to do that. And there's something so empowering about that idea of a choice of unlimited possibilities. And the concept of freedom, too, or positive freedom, in the words of Isaiah Berlin, is much more complicated because that kind of freedom isn't always something that is completely self-motivated. The idea that you have a freedom to choose whatever you want to do isn't always possible in a free society. Sure, we get the right of self-determination. We get the right to make our choices of how we want to behave. And hopefully they're conforming to standards that a society establishes for us, standards that enable us to be whole and caring and responsible and compassionate human beings. But freedom, too, also has a kind of limitation. there's a sense of authoritarianism. There's a sense that there's an authority or a collective understanding about what people are ultimately free to do. And I think that we are resonating deeply with this question of what Freedom 2 is all about. And I wanted to share that thought with us as we begin this day. And especially in this car as I'm about to head out into the world, and especially as the school year ends and the summer begins, and we're not running out into the streets, and we're not running to the beaches, even though we did that, and we realized that maybe there's some more consequences for us to take into consideration before we do that. So freedom to make any choice does have its limitations. And those limitations are actually really important to consider. Freedom to do anything isn't to do anything that you want. But freedom too is to participate in the conversations that make our collective experience as a society more compassionate, more just, and more kind. In this time, we're realizing that there might be a lot of expressions of freedom from. We've come from a very dark history of discrimination. We've come from a very dark history in which groups, minorities, and even elements of majorities were isolated, they were subjugated, they were separated. And at this time, tomorrow, we're going to be recognizing the moment in this country of emancipation. And we're going to be recognizing in this country the moment in which our brothers and sisters were given the possibility to choose a freedom to how they're going to behave in this country. And this moment only underscores how difficult and challenging freedom to can really be. Because there may be laws on the books that say we're not allowed to discriminate. There may be laws on the books that says oppression of any particular group of people is not acceptable in the society that we've created together. But freedom too also demands that we create spaces in which the expressions of identity of all people that are participating and are responsible for and responsible to this society have a voice. And I don't think that we have that yet. I think we can all agree that that's not yet the promised land that we're reaching. So on this day, and in these coming days, where it feels like we might be limited in the travels that we make in space, there is so much possibility about the freedom too that we have yet to journey together. And I hope that we can focus on that. Focus on the freedom to take responsibility and care for each other. Focus on the freedom of caring for those people that are marginalized and subjected in our societies. The freedom to look inside ourselves and to make sure that our choices are consistent with our highest values and be reflective and responsible when we don't ultimately live up to that ideal that we have created for ourselves. And freedom to build communities and societies that are built on the best of our ideals, that are built on the qualities that we find in our Torah, built on the virtues that we have discovered throughout the generations about compassionate understanding with each other, but also compassionate understanding of us as human beings, recognizing the dignity of all human beings, all flavors and shapes and sizes. That's the quest that we have. That's the freedom too that we have. There is no more freedom from. There's only a freedom to. And as we stand at the crossroads and we're looking which way to go, left and right, we have this wonderful gift, even this burden, even this responsibility to choose the right path. Have a great day. I wish for you all a wonderful journey in that path towards choosing freedom. And I hope that you continue to learn with us in our community in the coming days and weeks and discover and explore and celebrate that freedom with a community in love. Have a great day.